There has been an ongoing conversation about the leasehold reform for a number of years now, and in the previous months it's been hotting up as we prepare for the King's Speech, which actually happened just a few days ago. So the purpose of today's video is to unpack exactly what went down in the King's Speech, how it's going to help leaseholders in the future, and of course I'm only going to be able to mention high-level commentary on it because the draft bill hasn't been drawn up. Now the draft bill can be drawn up anytime from the moment of announcement to the end of the parliamentary sessions. So today I'm just going to be trying to make sense of you on what leaseholders could potentially expect in the future. Now, just as way as a disclaimer before we get into this video, I'm not a legal professional. I have been a leaseholder. I've bought and sold leasehold and had many problems along the way. I share a lot of videos about leasehold to educate others who may be thinking to purchase or sell in the near future. So the point of today's video is just to be as helpful as possible, but always please seek professional legal advice if you are looking at things like lease extensions or looking to sell your property. So anyway, enough about that. Let's get into the video and see what is going to be happening for leaseholders in the future. Okay, so let's dive straight into the King's Speech. I don't want to make this video too long. I just want to cover the main topics that we can expect as leasehold owners. So there was three main proposal headings that were laid out in the King's Speech, which I'll go into in more detail. That was enfranchisement, consumer rights, and enhancing rights. This is all going to make a little bit more sense now. Now, the first topic was enfranchisement, which is lease extensions or buying the freehold of the property. Now, coming in at number one, we've got making it cheaper and easier for leaseholders of houses and flats to buy the freehold or extend their lease. Now, this is a huge topic and this is going to help a lot of leaseholders if it comes into fruition. Now, extending a leasehold can cost thousands, if not tens of thousands to do. And you've also got marriage value, which comes into action when it gets to 80 years. So the less time you've got left on the lease, the more expensive it costs to currently extend your lease. Now, the word cheaper is quite ambiguous here. There's actually no explanation at the moment what that means, and we probably won't get any more detail until the draft bill comes out. But making it cheaper, I believe, from what I've seen online and from legal professionals, there's probably going to be some form of online calculator like there currently is for extending a lease. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like, but we can only hope that it is going to be substantially cheaper than it currently is to extend a lease. Now, another biggie is a lease extension will now be 990 years instead of 90 years on top of residual term. Now, this is a huge bonus. Now, if you hold a leasehold property for a long period of time, you may even have to do 2 lease extensions in that time. 90 years in the grand scheme of things isn't actually that much to add on to a lease these days. So 990 years is a hugely generous extension. And I believe you're still going to get that peppercorn ground rent that comes with that lease extension, which will avoid all those issues of onerous ground rent in the years to come. Now, the next topic is remove the requirement for a leaseholder to have owned their flat for a minimum of 2 years before applying for a lease extension. Now, this is a big one. This has caused so many issues with people trying to sell leasehold properties because the process has to be started by the seller before the new purchaser can purchase the property, because else they'd have to wait for 2 years. So this is going to be very welcome in the leasehold world. So lastly, on this one, we've got amend the non-residential qualifying criteria from 25% to 50%. Now, as it stands, leaseholders can't collectively purchase the freehold of the property if the non-residential is 50% of the entire property. So this is going to be very welcome for leaseholders that are in this situation, and it's going to mean that many more leaseholders are able to purchase the freehold. This is, of course, if it does get passed in the draft bill. So the second proposal point is consumer rights, and some of these are going to be super welcome for leasehold properties. The first one is make the conveyancing process of buying and selling leasehold properties quicker and easier. Now, I can tell you from my experience that it took me over 5 months to sell my leasehold flat. You're dealing with so many different people. There's no time frames of how long they're going to take to come back to you, and it costs a lot of money to even get inquiries out of your freeholder or your managing agent. It was definitely true of my experience trying to obtain an LPU unpack. Now, also, they are looking, obviously there's no detail that's sort of been confirmed here, but they are looking to introduce timeframes that the freeholder has to come back to inquiries, and also sometimes freeholders don't even come back, especially if it is at a request of a deed of variation or a lease extension. Freeholders make it difficult and expensive on purpose to leaseholders. So this is going to be very, very welcome in the leasehold world. Now, next up is better transparency of service charges. There's not a lot of detail on what this is going to be, but there is a look to make it more comparable, so people can clearly see what service charges have increased by, and obviously this is hopefully going to make it easier for people that are coming to sell their leasehold property as well. The next point is replacing insurance commissions with a transparent administration charge. Now, this is in a hope to get rid of unreasonable insurance charges to the leaseholders. Again, this is something that I came across where we had an insurance charge and we didn't even have free quotes to compare. And often it's because the freeholders are making a commission off who they choose. The next one is expand the redress scheme to include landlords who do not employ a managing agent. So this is essentially just freeholders who are just trying to manage the property themselves. They've not got a managing agent, and there's no sort of like liability against the landlord to get stuff done. I'm not entirely sure about that topic, but I'm sure more will come out in the draft bill on that one. Next, we've got remove the presumption that landlords can automatically recover litigation costs from the service charge account. Now, this is a welcome one. It's often the leaseholders in all situations, lease extensions currently, where you even have to pay for the landlord's legal fees. So this is going to be very welcome. And lastly, on consumer rights, we've got give freehold house owners equivalent rights as leaseholders, such as transparency rights and the right to challenge charges, which I think is a great addition to this if it gets passed. Now, the last proposal point that was on the King's Speech was enhancing rights. And coming in at number one, which is probably going to affect such a huge amount of leasehold owners, is the ground rent consultation. Something worth noting here is that the renters reform bill is something that's been trying to go through for a really long period of time now, and it's not been passed. Now, this is all down to what is considered onerous ground rent levels, which is anything which is over £250 outside of London or over £1,000 a year in London. And basically what happens is that if you are exceeding those, it's classed as an assured short hold tenancy, which basically means it becomes easier for the freeholder to take the property back if you fall into ground rent arrears. Now, the problem with this is it's making so many flats unsellable, as they essentially have a lease defect. And the problem is that mortgage lenders aren't wanting to lend because it gives them a level of risk themselves. And the ways around this have been indemnity insurance policies, which a lot of banks are choosing not to accept anymore, getting a letter from the landlord to state that an assured short hold tenancy won't go into play if they fall into ground rent arrears, and obviously the most expensive, which is a deed of variation or a lease extension. Now, the whole point of the ground rent consultation is to avoid this issue with the AST and to help people actually sell their properties where they're virtually unsellable at the moment. Now, the ground rent consultation is essentially putting a cap on ground rent. Now, there is no detail at this point what that cap will be. We obviously know that if you extend your lease at the moment, you'll get a peppercorn ground rent, but we just have to wait for the draft bill to come out to get some further information on this one. So next up, we've got enhancing Building Safety Act provisions. Now, there's little to no information on this available yet, so we've just got to wait for that more detail to come out when the draft bill is released. And lastly, which I think is possibly just great news, is banning the sale of new leasehold houses. Now, this has been a huge thing in the leasehold world, and it's all those new build properties that are being sold as leasehold houses, which is just, I just think it's awful. I mean, leasehold flats are obviously still going to be a thing, but at least this is going to be very, very positive for, all the leasehold campaigners that have been putting in work for the abolishment of leasehold properties. So in a nutshell, those were the three proposals and the points that came out of the King's Speech. Now, there's lots of positive stuff there to take away for leasehold owners, but it is a long road, and it's weighing up whether you wait or if you go ahead with it now, if you're going to be worse off for not doing so. So one of the questions that I've seen raised in the National Leasehold Campaign Facebook group, which I will link in the comments for you as well, was, I've just extended my lease, it's just added 90 years. Will I be able to get that 990 years if
you know, the bill is passed? And the answer to that is no. Retrospectively, in law, very, very little things are ever added retrospectively unless it's, you know, extreme circumstances or whatever. So basically, you're not going to get those 990 years back. The transaction has already happened. So that's rather unfortunate. So it is obviously weighing up, can you afford to wait for the new bill to pass, or should you be extending your lease right now? So again, it's just seek legal advice, but wait for the draft bill to be released. There's going to be a little bit more information that comes out of that. So let's talk about next steps. There is a long way to go still. Now, the next step is the draft bill. Now, this could be drawn up at any point from after the King's speech to the end of the parliamentary sessions. So we should hopefully see that very, very soon. And once that comes out, we've got a little bit more information and there'll be further detail about everything that was discussed. I am also going to link in the comments below the full information that came out from the King's speech that you can look through as well. Just to note that the legislative journey can also be tracked online to see where they are with the process. The next step goes to the royal assent, and then it's finally the commencement of the bill. Now, during this process, it can take some months and even years for things to be passed. And obviously, the other question is, what happens if parliamentary changes through a general election? Now, obviously, a few things can happen here. They could ditch everything that's been discussed, they could adopt everything, or they could shelve it for a later date. So there's so much up in the air about it at the moment, and that it's too difficult to say. The whole purpose of today's video, I wanted to unpack everything that happened with the King's speech. There is a lot of hope out there for leasehold. There's certain things that haven't been discussed, such as the abolishment of marriage value, and also the regulation of freeholders, which I think is just one thing that's got to massively be looked at for leasehold. It's absolutely awful that, you know, freeholders are not regulated. They can seemingly charge whatever they like, and it's probably one of the worst things about being a leasehold owner. But hopefully everything I've discussed today has made everything a little bit more clearer, and let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's look out for the draft bill, and I'll come back on an update with all of this stuff to you in one of my next videos.
I really hope you found today's video useful, and I really think there is some positivity that has come out of this. There is a long way to go in terms of the draft bill and getting things across the line, but if you do have any questions at all, please leave your questions in the comments below, and if I can't help you myself, I'll find someone that will be able to. But it is just a case of waiting for that draft bill to come out now to see what is actually going to go forwards, and there will be a little bit more detail about all of the reforms that they have laid out. So if you enjoyed watching today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, as it really helps my channel, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video.